So, welcome back to Everything Marketplaces, where we talk with founders and leaders from some of today's top marketplaces. So, this is episode 93, which is a really great group chat that we just had with Yenyi Fu, who's currently the head of product at Kimkim. So, Kimkim is a marketplace that helps travelers plan and book trips by connecting them to local travel specialists. Yenyi was also previously product at TripAdvisor for over 5 years and is an instructor at product school, so has some really incredible experience when it comes to both product and travel marketplaces. So this is a really great chat with Yenyi, where we got to learn more about her previous experience leading product at TripAdvisor. Now at Kimkim, did a deep dive into it as a travel marketplace, and also had a great Q&A for those in the chat. So really enjoyed this conversation. Now you're going to find it a great watch to the end. So Yenyi, welcome to the group chat. And a few of our past group chat guests, like Robbie Mehta, speak very highly of you as a top mind when it comes to product and travel marketplaces. So it's really great to have you join us here today. So I'm really excited to dive into all of your great experience at TripAdvisor and now at Kimkim. But before we do, I think it might be great if you can start off by sharing a little bit more on your background for those who don't know you.
Yeah. So I have a bit of a circular background, I would say, to get to product, and I feel like that's the case with any person that I talk to on the product side these days. So I have a engineering background, so I graduated as a software engineer. And I feel like when I was graduating, the two choices were you either go into engineering and software or you go into consulting. Those were the kind of the two paths. And I went into software development and found that wasn't quite the right fit for me. And then once you're in the industry, I found that there were so many different roles for engineers that I had never heard of: system engineering, solutions engineering. And then I even went into sales for a little bit, so enterprise sales. And it was really in enterprise sales that I discovered the product role. I worked very closely with the product manager for the product I was selling and talking about roadmaps. What should we build? What the customer's looking for? And then after a while, I just said, hey, maybe I should just have your job. And luckily, the product manager at the time was hiring. So I joined as a product manager. That was my first product role. And I think that was the perfect balance. It has business, it has the technology side, it has customer insights. I just loved it. And I stayed in product for the rest of my career, I would say, so far. And went from enterprise into consumer product in TripAdvisor. Focused on the mobile side of things. And then today I'm heading up a product at a startup called Kimkim.
Yeah, that's quite the background. And, thanks for sharing with us on that. So kind of going back, though, to the early days at TripAdvisor, could you maybe share a little bit, well, I guess first off, what led you to TripAdvisor and kind of joining a marketplace? And then maybe a little bit on, what you're working on there on the product side and maybe some of the challenges.
Yeah, so before TripAdvisor, I had my own startup focused on building mobile products, and that is what actually led me to TripAdvisor as well. It's a little bit hard to believe, but there was a discussion back then about, is mobile really going to be a thing? I'm sure you guys can remember as well. TripAdvisor had a mobile web presence already, but no native mobile app. So they wanted to do a bit of an experiment on, if there was a native mobile app, how much additional capabilities and how much additional engagement would it have? So they had a team in Palo Alto really focus on that experiment for TripAdvisor. And I was a part of that team. We built an app called City Guides. It was a native app at the time, focused really on using the benefits of a mobile device. So things like GPS access, location access. We were able to take things offline. The data was very expensive when you were traveling at the time. So these city guides were native apps that could be downloaded for any city, any of the top cities you wanted to visit. So the big cities like New York, Barcelona, Rome, and had all of TripAdvisor's content on there as well. So that meant you could travel with TripAdvisor and be able to access all the content, all the reviews, maps, be able to get directions, even though you didn't have internet access. So that was really popular with travelers going to international destinations. And over time, just the overall engagement and performance of the apps really answer the question for TripAdvisor, is there a need for a native mobile app? So the team really took over and built the native apps for TripAdvisor based out of Palo Alto. And I think the apps also changed the way TripAdvisor really thinks about mobile, right? So TripAdvisor is really a search-based system where you go to TripAdvisor, you look for hotels in Rome, right? But with mobile, you just have so much insight about the traveler that you can take a little bit more initiative. For example, you know the traveler what their home city is, right? So if the traveler is all of a sudden in Rome, you know that they're not in their home city. So instead of making them search for restaurants in Rome, maybe the experience is a little bit more personalized, right? So it can be whenever they show up in Rome, they open the app around lunchtime. Maybe the home screen experience needs to be best lunch places nearby or best cafes nearby if you're searching at 3 o'clock. So the mobile app was really able to take more of a personalized experience to the TripAdvisor travelers compared to the standard web app.
So what were like some of the biggest, I would say, learnings from your time there that you've then kind of taken with you to Kimkim?
Yeah, I think we did a lot of user studies at TripAdvisor, and the people that we found that loved TripAdvisor were all the planners, right? People who love planning trips. So you talk to a lot of travelers who spend hours on the TripAdvisor forum talking to experts in each of the locations. Where should I stay? Where should I go? They create giant Google spreadsheets to track all of their plans hour by hour. So those were for sure the core users of TripAdvisor. But we also found that there is a group of travelers who were really looking for an amazing trip to an international destination. How do I experience Rome in an authentic way? But they didn't want to spend 20 hours of research. They didn't want to read 30 blog posts. They didn't want to sort of make it a full-time job for a couple of weeks just to design that trip to Rome, right? But they didn't really want to just leave it to chance either and hope for the best when they arrived in Rome. And I think that is really the sort of the genesis behind Kimkim. Why did we start Kimkim? So just a little bit of background about Kimkim. What Kimkim tries to do is we look for, as a marketplace, we look for the experts for each of the destinations in destination. And what we try to do is when a traveler says, hey, I want to take a trip to Spain, for example, and I'm looking for a trip really based about history, culture, we try to partner the traveler up with a local expert in that destination that can really help them create an amazing trip. And the partner in that destination is really focused on what the traveler is interested in as well, right? So if the traveler is interested in history and art, that's the area that we partner them up with. If it's a family trip, we connect them with a specialist that is more focused on family travel so that the traveler can get the best experience that they're looking for with a local expert who really understands the destination as well.
Yeah, that's a great segue right into Kimkim. So, thanks for taking us right into that. So before we jump into it as a marketplace, some of the kind of specifics of it, I did want to kind of, ask a little bit more about, just for some context, I guess, like what stage you guys are at and then what sense of scale also.
Sure. So we have seed round funding. We have been able to get to a level of profitability on Kimkim. So the unit economics are positive. For every booking we get, it generates positive revenues for us. So right now we are kind of in the position of a luxury position of deciding whether we are going to fundraise to really scale even faster, or if we want to grow a little bit more organically. So that is a debate that we are having internally as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for sharing with us on that. So you did kind of give us like a brief kind of overview of Kimkim. But are there any kind of like non-obvious problems maybe that you're solving for, like as a marketplace that we might not be aware of?
Yeah, so I think the initial idea for Kimkim was really to vet the local specialists. So meet the local specialists, look at the trips they're doing, and decide kind of whether we want to bring them onto the platform or not. I think as we dug into that, we just found that aggregation model didn't really work very well for us. And I feel like that's the case with a lot of people getting into the marketplace. It seems like a very straightforward aggregation problem. And then you get into the marketplace and you find that many of the local specialists, for us at least, didn't really have the tools and to be able to scale the way we wanted them to be able to scale. So they were running their business on Excel, Microsoft Word. There was no tools to really create itineraries. There was no tools to really price out a trip for the traveler, right? And for travelers coming into who are planning a trip, those were like the first two questions that they would ask. Okay, that sounds great, what we discussed on the phone. Can I see an itinerary? And it would take a long time for the specialist to put together that itinerary. And then the second question is, hey, I love the itinerary. What is the price, right? And it would take a long time for the specialist to put together the price. And that's just not what consumers expect today, right? So they're just used to everything is available very quickly. Everything looks very professional. So dealing with specialists in Nepal or Bhutan, and the itineraries were just basically typed up notes. It just didn't create that level of trust and quality that travelers were expecting. So what we ended up doing was just taking on a lot more of the tools perspective for the specialist than we expected to initially. So over the past 4 years, we've basically designed a communications platform for the specialists to be able to keep track of all the conversations they're having with the different travelers. We created a itinerary building system. So the key thing here at Kimkim is that every itinerary is personalized, right? So how do we allow the specialists to create these personalized itineraries, but very, very quickly, because we are creating a lot of volume for the specialists. We created the ability to send pricing very quickly to the traveler to be able to collect the booking, collect the funds in a secure way. So we ended up taking over basically pretty much the whole tool chain for the specialists in order for them to be able to handle the volume of travelers, to create personalized and professional itineraries, and be able to take bookings securely on the platform.
Yeah, thanks for sharing with us on that. This is great. This is exactly what I want to jump into as far as building tools for the supply side of your marketplace. So I'm really interested to learn more about like at what stage though did you start kind of introducing some of those tools and kind of productizing them, with your marketplace. And just for a little bit of context, we have a lot of earlier stage marketplaces here in the community, and they're thinking about how they can kind of build SaaS tools for their supply side. So
yeah, I think we started that pretty quickly. I think initially the suppliers were sending PDFs, and the PDFs were very rough, I would say. They're mostly text, and it just took a long time for them to be able to create these itineraries. So we basically said, hey, and we could see that, right? One of the things that we really looked at was, what are the things that really improve the overall conversion rate on the platform? So some specialists were converting very well, and some specialists were converting not well at all, right? And what is that spread, and why is there such a big difference in the spread? And then as you drill into that, you start seeing different types of behavior from the specialists, right? So the specialists who were converting well, one of the things they were doing was actually sending an itinerary with their first message. And then the specialists who were not converting so well, it took them 2 or 3 days to put together the itinerary to send it to the traveler. So we were starting to talk about, so how can we take the best behaving specialist behavior and then pushing it through all of our specialists, right? And we saw that, hey, the top behaving specialists had some tools, right? They used third-party tools to generate their itineraries. So that gave us the confidence, hey, if we were able to replicate this for all of our specialists, we can see a lift in the overall conversion rate. So we started very simple. I think our first version of the itinerary building tools was very simple. So bringing some of their content onto the platform and allowing them to reuse it. Of course, 4 years later, our tools are much more sophisticated, right? So as you learn more and as you sort of iterate on the tools get better and better over time. But I think just drilling into kind of the difference in behaviors and really looking for where are the bright spots in your conversion really helps you identify what are some of the areas that you should invest in product. Another example I wanted to share around sort of digging into where you should invest in product. Another one was making phone calls, right? So these people are booking $6,000 trips, $8,000 trips to a foreign destination with someone that they've never talked to before, right? So how do they create that level of trust to book a $6,000 trip with the specialist? One thing we found was that a phone call made a big difference, right? You could hear the specialist, you can ask questions, you can feel confident about the specialist that's planning the trip for you. But that was a very difficult thing to do. What we saw, the specialists who were using phone call to convert the trips, they were sending messages like, hey, we can use Skype to do a phone call. Here's my Skype ID. And the traveler's like, what's Skype, right? And they're like, go to this link, download Skype. So it was very, very complex to make that phone call happen. And we looked at that and said, hey, that is a conversion driver. How do we encourage this type of behavior in all of our specialists? So we actually built a calling system on the platform where we made it much easier to collect the phone number for the traveler. And then for the specialist, it just became like, click the link to call the traveler and the phone call will go through, right? So that whole friction point of, creating like a meeting time, like what time zone are you in, all of those things disappeared. And it is now just one of the best practices that we encourage specialists to do. Just pick up the phone and call your traveler if there's any misunderstanding or not clear communications of what the trip looks like. It's much easier just to have a quick call on the phone.
Yeah, certainly. And then on the specialist side, so I'm curious to learn more. Are they kind of are they like freelancers or is this agencies or?
Yeah, we currently only work with agencies. It's just that in every destination, there is a level of insurance and security that we want to provide for the traveler. So when we looked at freelancers, we just didn't feel comfortable about that level of security that they were able to provide. So we work with agencies, inbound agencies in each of the destinations.
Awesome. And then, how many markets do you operate in as far as like when it comes to the agencies and maybe the markets that they serve?
Yeah, we're in 90 destinations today, and that list is always growing. So maybe it's slightly more than 90 right now. And we have about 250 agencies on the platform. And each agency on the small side would only have 1 to 2 people. And on the larger side would have about 10 salespeople on the Kimkim platform. So it varies in size.
Yeah, and you did actually have I know we were sharing some kind of notes, prior to the chat. You mentioned as far as some internal tools that you've built to kind of manage the agencies on the supply side.
Yeah, so I think like any marketplace, right? So Kimkim is really 3 products in one, right? Like any other marketplace. So there's the demand side product. How do you make sure that you have demand coming in? And that is really for us, it's as a travel product, of course, Google Ads, SEM is a big one. But one of the big things that we do is generating content that drives leads to Kimkim. So we have a pretty big SEO effort. And really to manage this SEO effort, we have sort of a content publication product in-house to be able to figure out what type of content we need for each of those destinations, those 90 destinations, assign editors, manage the queue of how many editors do we have working in this destination, how are they doing, are they managing the articles that they're producing, are they on time, are they behind schedule? So there's like an internal sort of content engine that we use to really drive the demand side of the business. On the supply side, we talked about that quite a lot, itinerary creation tools. And then we would have internal management tools for the team to manage those 250 companies, right? And all the specialists on the platform. And what we're really looking for is just tracking their performance, right? So the most important metric is conversion. What is the average conversion of each of the specialists on our platform? Are they for that destination? So the conversion obviously is different by destination, but for every destination, is this specialist on par with the rest of the specialists in that destination, below average or above average, right? So, and then we are able to look at that conversion metric and then look upstream at the engagement, right? So is the specialist getting back to the traveler fast enough? Are they sending a first message with the itineraries always included? Is their pricing on par with kind of what's expected for that destination? So we get into sort of a very nuanced level of performance metrics for each of our specialists. And we use these performance metrics to sort of tune the number of requests each specialist gets as well, right? So a very high performing specialist, we want to make sure that they get their full allotment of requests. And then a specialist who may be struggling, one of our destination development managers will reach out and put together a sort of a performance improvement plan. And we may not want to load them up with too many trip requests, right? So that they can really work on kind of improving their best practices, improving their performance before we sort of load them up with too many trip requests again. So that internal management layer is super important as well to, one, guarantee the quality that our travelers see from the specialists, and then just allowing us to identify which specialists are performing well, which ones are not, and put in place plans to improve the specialist's performance overall.
That's really interesting. That's probably going to lead to some questions here when we get to the group Q&A.
Sure.
So as marketplaces, we typically face the challenge of disintermediations at some points, right? And as you did mention, it sounds like some of the trips can be kind of like highly nuanced as far as when some of your users are kind of interfacing with the specialist. So are there any specific challenges that you've had to overcome with this kind of in the past? And you did mention as far as like some ways that you productize it. But is there anything maybe that you're still seeing that's just like a challenge with when it comes to disintermediation?
Yeah, we actually see that the specialist network are very, very loyal to Kimkim. So one of the things that Kimkim drives is just a lot of requests to these specialists, right? So I think if you think about the product market fit on both sides, the demand side as well as the supply side, I think one of the things that the supply side really values Kimkim is the whole marketing engine behind it, right? So we take what the specialists do well, which is running these trips in destination, and we help them with all of the marketing for that. So we publish their content on Kimkim. We help them drive traffic to the exact type of trips they're looking for. So the specialists really appreciate that level of support from Kimkim. And they are looking for ways to work even more closely with Kimkim. So There's not a lot of taking the travelers off the platform. They're actually looking for ways. One of the requests that we get a lot is, can I just run the rest of my business on Kimkim rather than taking business off Kimkim? And right now, we're not really set up to focus on that. It's just for us. We would love to do that in the future, I think, but right now we really want to focus on just growing the overall business that we're in right now. But I think that could be something that we do in the future.
That's a very encouraging request. So,
yes, it is for sure.
Yeah. So I'm also curious a little bit more, as far as like on the spectrum of when it comes to kind of frequency as a marketplace, from kind of low to high, where does Kimkim kind of fall on that?
Yeah, so travel, I think in general, especially international travel, which is what we're focused on, it is a low frequency business, right? So people travel on average once a year, I would say, once to twice a year. So that is something that we definitely think about. How can we help the travelers remember Kimkim for their next trip? And what we found so far is the best way to do that is to create what we call internally a 6-star experience. And we borrow this term from Airbnb. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but it's sort of a mental model. We ask for reviews, obviously, after the trip, but how can we make this trip such an amazing trip that you just cannot forget this trip in the future, right? I think that's the way we really think about having the travelers really remember us and come back and create another trip with us by really creating that 6-star experience. And that 6-star experience is different for each traveler, I think, depending on what they're looking for. Some travelers really value that local connection. We have some local specialists who meet the travelers in destination and take them around for a guided walk in their hometown. So that's something that is really memorable for travelers. Sometimes it's about taking the travelers to a local farmer who has been farming the same olive grove for generations, right? So what we find is it's really that connection with the locals that is the most memorable for travelers. And we try to create that connection wherever possible. And that's the thing that we find driving that 6-star experience. Of course, when you go to a new destination, if you go to Paris, you're going to go and see the Eiffel Tower. But is there some local spin, some local experience that can make this trip really stand out for you and not be just a more run-of-the-mill trip to that destination? And creating those 6-star experiences is what we really find travelers come back raving about. And that's what really drives them kind of to their next trips request, right? So we see a lot of repeat trip requests that say, oh my God, I had an amazing trip to Greece. I met my local specialists in Athens. I'm now going to Italy and I want to repeat that experience. Can you pair me up with a local specialist? So that's definitely one way that we are looking to sort of create that stickiness, given that we are not a frequent repeat type of business. And then, of course, other ways as well in terms of we love to provide our travelers with a photo book of their trip after they return. So it is very offline in this very online environment we're in. But I think those little touches really make it memorable for travelers as well, right? So they look at their photos 6 months later, it's like, oh yeah, we traveled with Kimkim 6 months ago. Where should we go next with Kimkim? So some of those tactics as well to try and create that stickiness to come back to Kimkim.
So we're going to get into group questions here because I have a few. But right before we do though, so you have some pretty incredible experience when it comes to, I would say product, but also specifically, within travel marketplaces. So do you have any kind of tips for early stage founders that might be building in that space that might be helpful?
Yeah, I think we sort of alluded to this a little bit before. I think as you are starting a new business, it's sometimes tempting, I think, just to look at sort of dashboards of metrics, right? Because they look very official and But I think one of the things about dashboards is that they sort of obscure kind of the spectrum of things that you are seeing, right? What we talked about, that we have some specialists converting really high and some specialists converting really low, right? A dashboard just looks at the average. Maybe the average is not where you want it to be, but what you're missing out is that full spectrum. And I think really digging into the bright spots, whether on the supply side or demand side, who really loves your product? Can you go and find more of those people, right? Which of the suppliers are performing really well? How can you replicate their behavior? I think just that is the way to really figure out where you should go with the product, and give you some ideas of what you should productize, or how can you find more of those types of customers for your business.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Actually, I would love to dig a little bit deeper in that. Could you maybe share an example of that, kind of like in the earlier stage of Kimkim, and how you kind of identified and focused on that?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned the sharing trip plan was one of the areas that we dug into. Another one is, I think changing behavior is actually very, very difficult, right? So we basically figured out, hey, if a specialist sends a trip plan with their first message, then they see an increase in conversion, right? So we did webinars with the specialists, we did one-on-one training, we produced a dashboard product so they could see how many of their trips they actually sent a trip plan with. We gave them a target. You had to have 80% of your trips with at least one trip plan, right? But what we found was that when we pushed really hard for, let's say, a month, everyone conformed, right? As soon as we stopped pushing, people kind of went back to their old behavior. And then you talk to them, and it's like, so why did you not send a trip plan or send an itinerary with this particular trip? What we found is that at the end of the day, back then as well, our tools were just not good enough for what they were doing, right? So it's Friday afternoon, 4:00, they get a trip request and they think, okay, I need to spend an hour to put this thing together. Or I could just call it quits and go home and see the family, right? And it's really hard to change that behavior. So we really thought about what we could do to make that change. And one of the ideas that came up in our brainstorming is, why don't we just create every single trip plan that this specialist could imagine using, right? And I totally remember the discussion. I was definitely saying, that's crazy. Like, why would we do that? How many trip plans is that, right? But then when you think about it, it is not it's not in the millions, right? We're not talking about creating millions of trip plans. For each specialist, we were probably talking about creating up to about 1,000 trip plans. And we basically, for a few destinations, just did that. We created thousands of trip plans manually for all of the specialists. And it was definitely doing something that doesn't scale. If you know the YC programs saying, do things that doesn't scale, it's definitely something that doesn't scale. But what we found was, now when Friday 4:00 came around and the specialists had to send a trip plan, they just had that trip plan at their fingertips, right? An hour job became like a 10-minute job, because they take a very similar trip plan, they change a few things, and they can send it out. And that was one of the things that really changed the specialist behavior. So sometimes the solution is not in the product, I would say, because to build that type of product took us years to build that, right? But sometimes doing things that doesn't scale manually can really close the gap of where you want to be with where you are currently.
Yeah, that's a really great example. And you got a lot of head nods when you mentioned doing things that don't scale here. So
yeah.
cool. Hey, Maxine, do you want to jump on with the question?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. That last explanation of doing webinars and one-on-one with your specialist was kind of the line I was going, is like, how long does it take to onboard a specialist at Kimkim? And can you describe that onboarding process from like identifying the agency to onboarding to taking the first request, and like how you budget that and make sure that that is within your margin? I'm assuming these one-on-ones and these webinars and creating trip specialists dug into that a bit to start, but you were testing whether or not that would increase conversion. Mm-hmm. Just like, how do you balance those two things?
Yeah, I think we have also been tuning that process over time. I think we've tried many different things. We've tried bringing on specialists in a batch, right, at the same time. We've tried sort of one-on-one, face-to-face meetings, like 3-4 meetings to onboard a specialist. And our latest iteration on this is much more of a self-paced onboarding. And I think one of the biggest things is when you have that business meeting, we find the specialists typically in trade shows, right? Lots of travel trade shows. And everyone's excited at the trade show. Sounds like a great opportunity. But how can you figure out if the specialist is actually motivated and is willing to do the work to get onto the Kimkim platform? And what we found with this self-paced mechanism is it really helps limit the amount of time we spend and really helps us find the specialists that are self-motivated. So we have a 3-week onboarding process every day that you, once you say, I'm ready to start, every day we send you exercises. You have to do this. First, create your specialist profile, right? Here's how you do it. Here's a video example. Email us once you're done, right? So once you email us, we send you the next module. Okay, next thing you need to do is to create your first trip plan. Here's how you do it. Here's the video example. So we really, it's still a manual process. One of our team members is really in charge of onboarding specialists, but all these modules are already predefined, right? So we let the specialists push us rather than us pushing them. What we found was when we push them, by the time we get them through the process, if they're not super motivated, then they're not motivated with the travelers as well. So in this reverse process, they push us as fast as they want to go, right? We can get a specialist onboarded in 2 weeks, or it may take 2 months, right? But if they're not super motivated in that process, then it removes the amount of time that we need to spend as a team to get them onboarded. And that has worked pretty well for us in the new onboarding process.
Amazing answer. Can I ask one more follow-up question?
Sure.
What have you found just qualitatively is the driving motivation for the specialists that are self-motivated? Is it access to new markets? Is it the increase in requests, or is it the money? Like personally, what are they finding that's like the most helpful for their small agency?
Yeah, so I think it also helps that we're much more established now. So I think that's definitely one of the factors. But they see that Kimkim is able to bring them trips, and they believe Kimkim is able to bring the trips because they see how many agencies are on Kimkim already. I think one of the difficult conversations we had in the earlier days is, hey, Kimkim can generate traffic for you. And then the agencies are like, okay, it takes me like a month to get onto Kimkim, right? How do I know that month of work is not wasted, right? Like I put in all this effort, and then if you can't generate any traffic for us, then I've just kind of wasted that month of work. So now I think we are able to say, hey, look at the 250 agencies on Kimkim today. They wouldn't be here if we weren't generating traffic. But back when we didn't have that sort of story, we would do a lot more of the onboarding for the specialists, especially if it was a specialist that we really wanted, like a new destination we were onboarding or we were starting, or we just felt really great about the alignment with that particular specialist. We would say, hey, we will do some of the work for you, right? Give us your itineraries, we will put them in the platform for you. So I think it definitely depends on where you are in your phase, whether you have to do more of the work or if you can push more of the work onto the supply side.
Thank you.
Awesome. Those are really great questions. Hey, Richard, do you want to come on?
Yes, love to. Thanks, Mike. Yenny, it's really nice to meet you. I'm Richard Abusi, founder, CEO of Citizen Shipper. You know, it's really coincidental. Just this weekend, I was going down a Wikipedia rabbit hole and was reading about an ancient city in Turkey called Göbekli Tepe that's 10,000 years old. And I found myself thinking how amazing it would be if you could connect with folks who had expertise and you know, someone who could show me around. And so
Right,
you know,
right.
a really great business idea. I think there's definitely a demand for it. And you know, just the coincidence of having thought about this weekend really speaks to that. And you know, I just went to your site and I read the awesome story about how you came up with the name Kimkim.
Right.
And for those on the call, apparently one of the first specialists and travelers both shared the name Kim, and so that's a great name for the company. Lots of questions, but I'll just stick with two quick ones. You know, earlier you mentioned about the value of connecting the specialist with the traveler via, you gave the example of Skype or a phone call, and I just wondered how you deal with platform leakage in that scenario, because one of the things that we have to do in our marketplace is, you know, just be very mindful of folks transacting offline. Our marketplace has a fairly high value transaction. I think there's quite an incentive for folks to transact offline. So interested in how you encourage the two to talk, but stop or prevent them making that arrangement offline instead of going through you. So that's the first question. And the next one is just really interested in how you find the demand side for your marketplace.
Yeah. So for the first one, I think at the end of the day, the specialists really value Kimkim, right? That's how we keep them on the platform and not take the business off the platform. So we monitor conversion rates. If the conversion rate starts going down because they're taking the business off Kimkim, then we would see that very, very quickly, right? And we would have that conversation. Hey, why is your performance declining? And if that doesn't pick up, if their performance doesn't pick up because they keep taking the business offline, then we would have to let them off the platform, right? We wouldn't be able to keep them on the platform. And I think for travel, it is a very low frequency repeat business, right? So a traveler that goes to Turkey this year, they're going to go to Greece next year. They're not probably going back to Turkey for the next 5 years, probably. So they're dependent on Kimkim to always find them new travelers, right? So if they take the business offline and Kimkim basically says, hey, this is not working for us, we need to end the relationship, then they would not be able to get the new requests from Kimkim in the future. So I think both of those things really is a disincentive for them to take that type of business, take the business offline, right? And then from a traveler side, the thing that Kimkim provides is just that smoothness of transacting, right? So we have a chat-based interface on Kimkim, so the traveler can just chat to their specialist. They see beautiful itineraries. They can have a secure booking platform. If you start taking that offline, it becomes, can you do a bank transfer to my bank? Can you do a wire? And I think people are just not comfortable like wiring $6,000 to Turkey, right? Like, yeah. What does that mean? Versus Kimkim is American business with a reputation. So I think there's lots of reasons why the traveler also doesn't want to take that business offline.
I see.
Well. And then your second question was the demand side. Yeah, the demand side is really for us SEO and SEM, right? So SEO, we generate, it's interesting because when we started the business, there was definitely people who said, hey, you can't really compete on SEO with the big travel providers out there like Booking.com, Expedia. But I think what we have found is a way to not compete with the big players, right? We don't compete on the same terms as Booking.com. We don't compete the best hotels in New York City or the best hotels in Istanbul, but we really compete on the terms where travelers are looking for help, right? So the terms that we really compete on, best 7-day itineraries to Costa Rica, or best family trip to Greece and the islands. And those are the terms that Kimkim is really winning in terms of SEO. So that generates a lot of traffic for us. And that's where a lot of the demand comes from.
Good. Thank you for the great responses, and wish you all the success with your company.
Yeah, if you're planning a trip to Turkey, just let me know.
Thank you. I will do. Appreciate it.
Those are great questions, and that was an awesome intro, Richard. So
Thank you.
We should have just had you host this group chat today. So.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, Davey, do you want to jump on?
Yeah, sure. Yenyi, I have 1,000 questions. I'm just gonna stick to one. I'm building a marketplace that is not similar as yours, but we provide on-demand drawings. So we connect illustrators with customers. Oh. And when I see Kimkim, well, first I love traveling, so obviously I'm like that speaks to me. But also, it's like the journey that you have created for your customers is actually kind of similar in the product that we deliver. You deliver a specific itinerary, custom itinerary for your customer. I want to deliver custom drawings. And when I'm on this website, I actually see a lot of questions that you're asking people when they just get in touch with you. Do you have any drops in the question fillings? How do you manage that? And how do you make sure people want to take time to fill all of those different steps? Because I'm having the kind of same system, and I want to make it fast, but I don't want to make it too fast because you need specific info to make it work.
Yeah, that's a great question. And when I first joined Kimkim, I definitely had the same thinking. It's, hey, if we can reduce the quiz, is there a way for us to improve the conversion rate? But what we found is actually the more specific questions you ask, the more people actually trust your website, right? So it's not about, I've seen lots of travel websites where they ask the same question, no matter if you're going to Costa Rica or you're going to Spain or you're going to Barcelona. I think having that type of onboarding actually diminishes the trust. It's like, you don't understand what I'm trying to build and you don't understand what I'm looking for. But when you make it very, very specific, it actually builds trust. And we've seen, like, we add more questions and we think, okay, is the completion rate going to drop? And what we find is it doesn't drop at all, right? People get excited to tell us about their trip. And that's, I think, one of the learnings that I've had at Kimkim. So we do something very specific for every destination. So if you go to Costa Rica and fill in a quiz, you see that the list of questions we ask is completely different if you go to Greece and you fill in a trip, right? Because obviously, if you're thinking about Costa Rica, you're thinking about the wildlife, the nature, the volcanoes, the waterfalls. And as the traveler is filling this in, they get even more excited about their trip, right? But if you go to Greece, you're excited about the food, the islands, the beaches, the culture, the history. So we make the quiz, the onboarding very, very specific. And I would say the same thing for you. I actually had this problem recently. I was looking for an illustrator and I used Upwork to do this. And I was very frustrated with the process, right? Because I was looking for something very specific and the question just asked, do you want a designer or a web designer? I'm like, no, that's not what I'm looking for. I want to be able to tell you exactly what I'm looking for so that the person you connect me with is exactly what I'm looking for. I don't want to go through 50 applications where someone says I can do HTML and I'm like, that's not what I'm looking for, right? So I think creating that onboarding where you can find out exactly what your traveler is looking for and connect what your customer is looking for and connecting them with exactly the right person for them is actually a very motivating experience for the person rather than, it will actually create trust rather than having them drop off.
Thank you very much, because that was exactly what I was dealing with. And we're coming to help you as well for illustration. Don't worry.
All right. Send me a link.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just have another question real quick, is understanding the business model. So do you charge like the agency per lead, or is it on every single transaction? And can you tell us a bit more about it?
Yeah, so we charge per transaction. So on a lead, we don't charge them. So they get X number of leads as long as they're conforming to our best practices per month from us. And then we charge per booking. So once they make money on that trip, then Kimkim gets a commission based on that booking as well.
And can we imagine that at some point, if you have a lot of suppliers, that you're just going to ask them to have a membership just to maintain a high, I'm going to say like a high involvement in all the leads that you generate to them, because you know that at the end, if you have an agency that's not working so much, then maybe at the end you're still losing money for this specific destination with this agency. So you will be limited at some point. You will not going to have 60,000 agencies, because that will make no sense for you, but maybe just playing with the best and create like a kind of incentive by saying, okay, now it's a paid membership because we provide a lot of value, and that helps you to just make sure they stay engaged with your customer. Is it part of your financial plan or ideas in the future? Just asking.
Yeah, it's not something that we've thought about, having the supplier side create a membership. I think their commitment to us is actually how much leads that we're generating for them. So our commitment with them, so our top tier of specialists is actually on an exclusive plan with us. So they basically don't take any other trips. They just work on Kimkim. So that's kind of our sort of level up on the commitment, and we give them a commitment as well. So we commit to X amount of trips per year for them. So in a destination where we have many specialists, we may have one dedicated specialist that is only doing Kimkim, and we commit to making sure that they have the right number of leads. And then we have some other specialists that may not be on the same level, that we will give best capabilities, the best number of leads we can to them. That's kind of how we've ensured commitment to Kimkim.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Those are great questions. I'm going to get just one more in if we can. Hey, Sarah, do you want to jump on?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Yenyi, for the experience share on Upwork as well. So Growmotely is a remote work marketplace helping companies hire aligned talent everywhere in the world. So that was good user info and insight for me. I think so. I kind of typed my question in when you were talking, but basically you were talking about how you give less trips when people are struggling a little bit with figuring out how to do the trip planning, that you would give less trips to them and upskill them, and you were moderating like who got how many. And I was curious, is that an automated process built into the tech based on ratings and things like that and velocity, or is that something that you're manually doing? Like, I couldn't quite understand that part.
It's a combination. We have some dashboards to help the team monitor performance, but we have a number of destination managers who basically manage that destination, right? So every day they look at their dashboard and see, hey, how are things going? Are people getting the right number of leads? Should we tweak SEM to increase the number of requests? Should we commission some articles? Is all the specialists getting the right conversion rates? And then they would make the decision to whether to reduce the number of requests to a specialist and start the training process. So it's a combination of dashboards plus manual process right now.
So all trips are actually pushed through manually at some level, or no?
No, trips are not routed manually now.
Okay.
Trips, that was one of the things we've changed. So because we're getting so many trips now, we basically have an automated process for that.
Okay, but it's just like controlling the levers on how much goes through, is that?
Yeah, so the team will control the levers, and then we
Mm-hmm.
have an algorithm that says, okay, so this specialist, their load has just decreased by 50%. Then we look at this new trip coming in,
Mm-hmm.
and we rank all of them by performance, by how many trips they've gotten in the last week, in the last month. And then budgets, is this a good fit for the type of trips that this trip is? And then we would route it automatically based on those factors.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Awesome. That was a great last question. So yeah, on that note, we're almost out of time here. So definitely I want to be conscious of that. But yeah, Yenyi, this is a really great chat. So, thanks for taking the time to join us and share all of your awesome experience and insights. I had one last question I want to wrap up with, though, and that is, if you could go back to right before you joined TripAdvisor, or maybe even just right before Kimkim, what would you tell yourself about marketplaces?
I think probably my biggest learning is that it's very, very hard to change people's behavior. I think much harder than I expected. As I started on Kimkim, I was expecting, we just need to find the best practices and teach people about it, and that would be able to change their behavior. And what I've seen over the past few years is that it's not easy at all to make changes. And I think it's really a combination of building the right products. It is doing the manual work to get the behavior you want, rather than it's an easy thing to change. So it's a good learning over the past few years.
Yeah, certainly. That's a great way to wrap things up. So, last but not least, time for kind of a quick plug. Where can we keep up with you at?
Probably the best place is I do try to write some of my product learnings on Medium. I don't get too many articles, but as I come up with new learnings, I do try to post there. So that's probably a good place to connect, or on LinkedIn.
Awesome. I'll include a link in the details to this. So, and then I guess kimkim.com, right? So sounds like we have quite a few new users that'll probably be checking it out soon here. So.
Yeah, I would love to hear your feedback. So
awesome.
Always love hearing user feedback.
Well, thanks again for joining us today. This is a really fun chat, and thanks everyone for the great questions.